So the next lock I'm going to make is one of these bezel locks, which you find in bracket clocks and dial clocks, and they work by just attaching the bezel rather than a whole wooden door on a tab, which has a little hole in it. This is another one. It's out of a bracket clock. It's a lot bigger, as you can see, but it takes a key that's the same size. And the way they get around it is they put a step on the pin that the key sits on. So when you turn the key, it still pulls it back. It doesn't pull it back very far, but it pulls it back enough to release the catch, the actual bezel itself. So if I put my fingernail where that little shiny bit is, which is where the bezel tab would fit, and it actually clears it. The reason it's so big is there's more space between the side of the case and the bezel. Some had canted corners or pillars down the side, or for some reason it was wider, and that needed to reach the tab. So when you're replacing these things, if they're missing, you have to understand how it worked and what it needs to reach. So this is quite an easy lock to make. You just need a couple of pieces of brass and a piece of steel for the pin for the key, and a way of fixing the catch onto the back plate. You can either screw it on with a machine screw, this one seems to be done like that, or a couple of rivets to do it. Little brass or even steel panel pins are very good because they've got that tapered head, so you can push that home on one side and rivet the other end off, clip it down and just hammer it over. So the first thing you need to do is cut a square hole in the back plate and cut the end of the catch like that, and that piece needs to fit fairly neatly in the square hole. So I've cut out the square hole in the back plate for the catch to fit through, and I've also drilled the hole for the pin for the key. So now I need to cut out the catch so that it fits neatly through the slot. So I've cut the end of the catch with two shoulders and parallel so that it fits through the slot. It's also flush on that side. So the next thing I'm going to do is mark how much of it sticks out the back. And then from that line I'm just going to mark a curve. And that bit, that little corner I need to cut out. So I've cut the end off, and now I'm just going to tidy it up with a file. And smooth it off on a bit of paper, because the actual tab of the bezel will actually slide on this. So it needs to be quite a good polished finish really to make it work well. So the next thing to do is to bend the catch down at about 90 degrees. So now the catch fits in the back plate and is bent across. The catch is cut to shape, but it does cover up the pin for the key. So the next thing to do is cut out half a keyhole shape in the side. So I've cut out half a keyhole shape in the catch, and I've also put the pin in. So it now fits, and there's enough room for the key. So the next thing to do is this needs to be springy, so I need to work harden this, and I'll do that by beating it with a hammer basically, just squashing it, and it does make it slightly springy, and it just works better. So to work harden it, all I need is a steel block and a hammer. And just keep flipping it over now and again so it doesn't curl up out of shape. So I've work hardened the spring, so that works now. It's spread it out quite a bit and made it longer, so it just needs trimming down a bit. I've also had to take a file to this corner here so that the key catches in correctly. I might have to take a bit of the corner off. A lot of the time the keys are cut like that. So it's this slight S shape now. I'm just checking that the key actually works and pulls the catch out the way. I think it just needs a little bit more taking off the tip to make it work properly. But the next thing will be to drill a hole and fix the two together. I'll use a machine screw so I can take it off and make fine adjustments afterwards. So all the parts are finished now. I've drilled and tapped a 6BA hole, and I've drilled the screw holes for screwing it to the case, and I've put a hole in the spring to attach it, and I've also trimmed it down so it fits now. And it works very well. Snaps shut, spring works properly. The difficult bit was making the spring, because when you beat it, it distorts it a bit, and it's not too bad to get it right, but you need to get the line right so that the key actually lifts the actual catch out, and your leading edge needs to be filed up, and it just takes a little bit of messing around, but it's a fairly straightforward thing to make. There's not a lot to it. But like I say, the spring is probably the hardest thing to just get right. I think using a screw to keep the catch in place is preferable to riveting, because you do need to take it on and off a few times just to fine tune it. Because once it's riveted on, you're stuck with it then, and it means drilling it out and going through it all again. And it's been on and off several times, so a screw is probably the only way to do it. So that's the lock completed now, and this is the original. Now I've left mine straight and square at the ends, whereas the original one, the top and the bottom were curved and it was tapered. Now I don't know where I got this from. I think it was in a box of bits or I picked up somewhere, and the reason it's that shape, it must have come out of a dial clock. And the way they fit them is, that's the dial surround, a cross section, that's the bezel, that's the glass, and that's the dial, and the tab runs through there, and that's the lock. And they bury the lock part way into the back of the dial surround. There's another piece of wood on the back of that which encases the other side of it, and because it's difficult to get the screws in, there's another piece of wood there, and that's screwed through. So it's completely encased in the woodwork, and the key goes in that way. So if you look at it front on, the lock sits like that, and this back piece here would just be that shape. And because the tail end comes further out, closer to the edge, and depending how thick this dial surround is, you don't want that cutting through the front of the dial surround. So that's why they are made like that. They're probably set in at a slight angle as well, just to keep that tail away from the front face. So if that was to be used on a dial clock, I'd have to cut it round. It doesn't matter if I cut through the holes, they're not used, so it doesn't really matter.